Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us on the SX Network Community Call, our monthly community call. We are joined by Andrew, co-founder of SX Network, and we have a scheduled Q&A session ready for you, along with development updates on the chain. How are you doing today, Andrew?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Mohammed. I'm ready to excited to share all the progress over the last month. It's been a pretty crazy month, so lots of good stuff.
Okay, we're glad to hear that, and I'm going to pull up the slides and the questions as well.
Yeah. Also, to answer Kenny Powers' question, I have cut my hair, but the market hasn't tanked yet, so we're still good for now. But you guys can blame me if the market starts to tank over the next month. We shall see. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Are you able to go full screen, by the way?
Yeah, I'm actually was I'm trying to do that as well. We can just continue for now while I figure that out.
Okay, yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, first of all, welcome everyone. This is our monthly community call for November. Um, we have a pretty good we have a pretty good lineup for today. Just going to run through a quick presentation on just sort of what's going on in the community right this month and right now, and then we have sort of a bunch of pages of questions to get through. So, very good questions, by the way. And so, you want to just actually go to the first slide? I do want to show off our new logo as well. So we realized there's a lot of confusion with sort of reusing the Sportx logo for also sort of the SX network blockchain. And so we have kind of built out a new logo that we just introed to everyone yesterday, as you can see there, and just go with kind of a more of a blue theme for on the SX network side. And then also we're using this tagline, the blockchain for betting, which I think is kind of encapsulates what we're trying to build with SX Network. Next slide, please. So before kind of going into more of the individual kind of monthly data, I just wanted to quickly recap sort of what we're building and what the mission is. So what SX Network is we're essentially trying to build a blockchain ecosystem for prediction markets, sports betting, and related DeFi applications. And the vision really is to build essentially an ecosystem that's tailored to, at least initially, to a specific use case. The first wave of blockchains, i.e., smart contract blockchains, i.e., Ethereum, really, and I guess you could maybe put EOS in there, were designed, were sort of just designed for security over everything else. And the second wave has been kind of, they've essentially blockchains like Solana, Polygon, Optimism. Uh, they've been designed more for scalability. We think the third wave of blockchain ecosystems are going to be sort of industry specific. And at least initially, they'll be sort of industry specific. And so that's things like Compound Chain, Osmosis, as well as SX Network. And so really SX Network is kind of the parent name for the three interrelated technology platforms that we're building at the same time. There's obviously the Sportx, which is the sort of consumer-facing web app that everyone sure is familiar with, which hosts over 500 prediction markets per day, which is actually quite a feat given how hard it is to build sort of the data reporting and infrastructure to actually create and settle so many markets per day. A lot of people don't realize it's quite difficult to build a prediction market on top of a blockchain because everything's irreversible, which is better for users, but it makes it very tough to sort of develop. Obviously, we're just about to break the $75 million mark, which is great. We're well on our way to our $100 million goal. There's the second layer, which is SX Protocol, which is the open source smart contract protocol that Sportx is built on. Kind of, you can almost think of it as like the back end of Sportx. That also facilitates the SX token, SX Treasury, sort of houses all of that logic. And what's great about that is we have a couple of other front ends building on top of this back end that we're really excited to sort of tell you guys about soon. And then finally, SX blockchain. This is kind of the final piece in this sort of vertical integration and highly scalable EVM compatible proof of stake blockchain built using the Polygon SDK. We're hoping to launch in December. To be honest with you, I'll give you more kind of updates there. We've built out most of the pieces on our end. We're sort of bottlenecked a little bit at the moment with the Polygon team, but obviously they're building out software to let people build out their own blockchain. So it's obviously a lot of stuff needed there, and you want to get it right because you kind of only have one shot. Next slide, please. Okay, cool. Yeah, so this graph was in our actually, if you don't check out our SX Weekly, which is our weekly newsletter, you probably would have seen this chart. So Sportx continues to grow pretty rapidly. We've essentially gone from less than $1 million a week in volume, sort of mid-August, to over $4 million a week now, or we broke $4 million a week this last upcoming week. Past week. And it's great. We've set new highs for volume 3 weeks in a row. And November was our largest month ever. Or sorry, that should say October. October was our largest month ever. It was a little bit over $12 million, which is, I think it's around 45 to 50% bigger than our previous best month. Last week's volume of 4.1 million, just so everyone sort of understands, annualizes to over $200 million a year. We're on track to grow annual betting volumes in 2021 by more than 1,000%. And so we continue to be the fastest growing blockchain prediction market. Next slide. So the SX Community Fund continues to grow as well. Oh, someone's saying, can we get the slides to be full screen? There, maybe, Mohammed, do you want to try to deal with that? I'll try to speak to the slides a little bit as well. I didn't realize it's hard to read. So this chart essentially is just showing the growth of assets in the community fund, excluding SX, just to make it kind of easier to see. So the SX Treasury now has just around $1.5 million in it. If you include SX, it goes up to 60 million. And the community fund, as you guys know, essentially houses all of the revenue that comes from Sportx and the SX protocol. I should say it comes from SX protocol, meaning that other apps that are built on SX protocol would also contribute revenue to the fund. Definitely want to make that distinction. Next slide, please. So just wanted to highlight a couple of events over the last month. So I guess actually 2 of these came from the last week. So the first one was our first major centralized exchange listing just happened. We have sort of a marketing campaign starting to ramp up with that. That's great. It gets more sort of access and awareness of sort of the network. And another really big thing, and kind of one of the big drivers, is it allows us to get the Chainlink price feed, which allows us to essentially access lending markets, stable coins, a number of other sort of initiatives. And the reason why is that Chainlink price feed needs centralized exchanges. It doesn't look at DEXs as of yet. And so that there's like more than just kind of an awareness or marketing sort of advantage. There's kind of a strategic advantage there. The bet credits, which is honestly one of the biggest features we've launched on Sportx in a long time, that was actually launched on Monday. This is amazing. And the main reason why is Sportx has always had very, very good sort of retention and support from people who are already in the community, but we've tended to lag on sort of conversion. And so if you think of our sort of business funnel or whatever you want to call it, we've done a pretty good job at the awareness step, which is like the top of the funnel. And we have a pretty good, or I'd say very good sort of retention. It's just the conversion piece, which is sometimes lagging. You can kind of think of it as like an hourglass shape. And so bet credits is great for that specific step in the process, which is conversion. It allows essentially new people to the platform to effectively get free money to bet on the site. Finally, the last piece is the Polygon Index. So SX right now is getting a 5% allocation in this. Essentially, it's kind of like a decentralized ETF in a way. That's going to be coming out. So I just saw one of the questions. Any idea when that's going to be released? Don't actually know yet. I'm still sort of waiting on the index co-op team, but I would suspect by the end of this year. And I think that'll be a pretty good catalyst for growth for the platform. Next slide. Yeah. So our end of 2021 roadmap, almost think of it as like our Q4 roadmap. Continue getting apps. Besides kind of those initial
I can make it full screen.
Oh, okay, perfect. I'll just keep talking. So continue getting more apps to the. Oh yeah, that's way better. Yeah, I mean maybe we can go back to some of those charts from before. Actually, the slide before that. Sorry, I'm confused. Okay, well, I'll essentially keep getting apps on the platform. So we want to scale to over 100. That's like that to us puts us in the top 10 most used blockchains in the world, which we think is more than doable. And the second key piece is continue going after these front ends that are building on top of SX protocol. Really excited to sort of share more about that. It's kind of one of those big sort of things that we've been waiting on and hoping to get out as soon as possible. And then finally, scaling Sportx volumes to $20 million a month. Funny enough, we're actually already on that pace, sort of ahead of time with the $4 million a week in volume. And so that, I mean, that seems more than doable. Just kind of continue this pace. There may be some sort of, I could see some sort of like corrections in volume week to week, but I think sort of the trend line is very, very good so far. Next slide. Sorry. Okay, so we have a ton of community questions, so I did want to kind of speed through the first part and get to all these questions. Yeah. First of all, thanks again to everyone for sort of sending these in. So yeah, the first question is essentially how does the building of your blockchain affect the price of SX token? Are they required to buy and stake SX to build on your chain? So SX network, the dynamics of sort of the token and the network are very similar to the dynamics of something like Matic to Polygon or ETH to Ethereum. SX is the reserve currency of this new digital economy, and these apps are kind of like the businesses that are going to attract customers and sort of depositors to this new digital economy. And so as you get more and more apps on top of the chain, you sort of increase the demand for block space. That's essentially the easiest way to think about it is SX network provides block space, and to pay for that block space, you need SX tokens. And as you increase demand for block space via more users, more apps, that increases sort of the demand and therefore sort of the transaction fees needed to use the block space. So it's kind of an interesting thing where as you get more and more users, you get this network effect, which makes the project more defensible to competition. But it also has this other sort of driver where it increases transaction fees, increases sort of usage and demand. And so, yeah, I mean, A16Z put out this great tweet saying like the most valuable commodity in the next 10 years is block space, and we couldn't agree more. So I'll just Next question: will the Cendex listing support the Polygon chain version of SX, or do you need to convert to ERC20? So at the very start, it's going to be ERC20. We'll get Polygon support pretty soon, though. We'll definitely push the team on that. What are the next apps to enter in SX network? So I'm not going to give any individual names, but a lot of the focus of sort of the next wave of applications is definitely more traditional DeFi. We're seeing a lot of demand from these sort of DeFi applications, and we haven't announced sort of many of these over the last month, just because we've been dealing with sort of getting the chain up and live. So we've been kind of building this pipeline of projects, and so we're pretty excited to start announcing all of those over the next couple of weeks. But yeah, very much they are centered in the DeFi. So you can think of kind of like AMMs, lending, sort of those types of applications. When will SX Chain be ready? That's a great question. I think like I said, we're sort of bottlenecked a little bit at the moment with the Polygon SDK team. We've built out a ton of the infrastructure of SX network at this point. So like the Explorer, the sort of validator, the bridging. It's at this point we've really built out a ton of the technology needed. There's just some issues sort of with not even issues. Just want to make, obviously with a blockchain you need it to be very hardened before you can actually launch it, and so that's kind of what our focus has been with the Polygon SDK team. One of the things is we are very early. We're the first project to launch a chain using the Polygon SDK, which has a lot of advantages. First being that we're the first ones out of the gate. When we talk to Polygon projects, they're very excited, and they're very excited to sort of expand onto our chain, and it's a natural sort of selling point. But at the same time, the downside is you sort of have to, there's obviously some technical issues with being first, and so that's what we're sort of working through. But I do think we're making a lot of progress. Which new updates will be on Sportx by the end of the year 2021? That's a great question. I actually would put that back to the community, because we've spent so much time on the bet credits sort of to fix the weak point in the sort of volume acquisition process, or whatever you want to call it, which is conversion. And so I think we're actually quite open to community suggestions on sort of what to build out next. We have kind of a list of ideas that we're working through, but I think maybe we'll put together a poll on some different sort of product features and let people vote on them, because it's just much better to get your guys' input onto what to make the platform better. Will bet mining always have a maximum of 150,000 SX? Honestly, that's actually up to the community. So bet mining 2.0 was determined, bet mining is essentially can be controlled by the governance process. So if someone wants to put a proposal up to sort of change bet mining, then it's really kind of a democratic process. I will say we are very close to announcing some really exciting news with bet mining. We sort of hinted towards it in one of our SX Weekly newsletters, but we've been working with a partner, you can probably guess who's giving us sort of a big grant for the next 3 months to increase bet mining. And so essentially you'll be earning both SX and this other token when you bet on Sportx. It's pretty awesome. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, I'm seeing one of these comments, tokenizing staked SX next. Yeah, that's a great idea. That's something someone brought up in the Discord, and I think that makes a lot of sense. So what is the strategy to get dApps to build? What is the strategy to get dApps to build and bridge over? So I would say there's kind of two strategies. The first strategy is we sort of tailor the strategy based on what type of application it is. So if it's an application that is kind of more prediction market or gaming, we sort of lean more on the Sportx angle and kind of the community angle. where there's a lot of synergies. Obviously, if you're building a prediction market application or you're building sort of a gaming product, because you can tap into this sort of growing community of crypto native bettors, which is sort of a small but rapidly growing niche. And then on the DeFi applications, there are a lot of strategies, but mainly one of the big ones is just has been just the fact that this is a blockchain that actually has real applications on it and real sort of revenues and real users. And so, and there's also these projects, like I said, that are launching on top of it that a lot of them are sort of creating new tokens and bringing sort of new TVL to the platform. And as a DeFi project, it's kind of this new source of we'll call it deal flow or TVL to access. And so it's really kind of just selling the vision and then also selling sort of the growth story to these DeFi projects. Particularly, we've had a lot of success with sort of Polygon-based or people who are sort of familiar with Polygon, obviously, because of our close association with sort of the Polygon team. Especially, obviously, we're building this with the Polygon SDK. And so there's a lot of sort of complementary, it's a very complementary sort of relationship with Polygon-based DeFi projects. Are there any plans to build out an incentive model to get tokens to those who build the first AMM lending platform in DEX? So this is a great question. I think I actually saw the next question is actually quite similar, but so this is a great question. The community fund, so one of the really cool things about what we're building out with SX Network is that the majority of the tokens are actually going to the community fund. And the community fund is sort of decided, the distributions are decided by token holders. And so anyone who wants to create a proposal, say that they're building a new AMM or they're building a lending platform or a stable coin, they can actually apply to the treasury to get funding to actually build out this project. And whether that's like a direct grant or a direct investment from the DAO, which is something we did sort of with AthleteX, or just to fund liquidity mining from the DAO level, those are all on the table. It's something that I think it's something that we'll obviously look into, and we are sort of using that as well. We've already, obviously, AthleteX is kind of a good example of that, but it's also something where developers who want to build these types of applications can come to the community fund themselves, and we'll obviously help them sort of with that process. We saw that Avalanche's launch struggled as adoption was slow, as they focused on bridging over existing projects that can't offer new users the strongest yields, rewards, incentives, versus Phantom, which incentivized new projects. What is the team's strategy to help choose SX Network at the start when they launch their first? So this is a great question. And just so people sort of understand the context, Avalanche launched in February, I believe. And they hit kind of TVL of about $250 million within their first 2 weeks of launching. And then for about 6 months, they essentially saw no TVL growth. It was essentially still, I believe it was at 300 million. And then they launched this $180 million liquidity mining program. And since then, their TVL on the platform has increased by about 30x to just about $9 billion. And so one of the things that they did is they struggled initially with sort of bridging over existing projects. And I think part of and then obviously whereas something like Phantom, which has gone after new projects like Spooky Swap and whatnot. So I think one of the things with Avalanche though is they didn't have a natural, the pitch for Avalanche, not to get too specific with Avalanche, is they were sort of going after Ethereum projects to try to get come over to Avalanche, which didn't really fit with a lot of Ethereum projects' ethos or whatnot. Whereas I think we have more of an advantage in the sense that we're actually building on top of Polygon. And so bridging over Polygon projects is like a very natural sort of first step. And so I think we have an easier time, I think, getting existing projects to come onto our chain, particularly, obviously, Polygon projects. We're not trying to go after kind of existing projects on Avalanche, for example, because it doesn't really make sense. And Polygon's obviously really big. And like I said, the TVL on SX network is also TVL on Polygon, as they're the main bridge. And so, like I said, again, it's a very complementary relationship. It's not like a vampire attack or anything like that. With that being said, though, we're obviously new projects are great. And there actually has been, of these kind of 15 projects that have come out, I believe around half of them are actually completely new projects. And so I guess what I want to try to say is we're going after kind of existing projects on Polygon, and then we're also going after sort of new projects at the same time. So it's a combination of both. Current strong governance structure. Does SX have any thought to having community votes to fund or seed new projects? We sort of answered this already. Actually, we've already done this with Athlete X. The SX Community Fund actually invested $100,000 into the Athlete X presale, which has actually been a great investment. I believe the token sort of up significantly from when the community fund launched. And so that's definitely something I think the community fund should get more involved in. Any updates on SX Dollar? Yes, the SX Dollar team has been actually quite hard at work. It's quite a good team. I actually have some updates to share with you. For the most part, the bottleneck right now with X Dollar, obviously SX Network hasn't launched yet. So that's like the big bottleneck. But another bottleneck has been the chain link price feed. And so by getting SX on Cendex, for example, that kind of allows us to remove that key bottleneck. And one idea that could be possible as well is to actually launch the SX stablecoin on Polygon initially, and then sort of bridge it over to SX Network later on. And so it's definitely haven't really done any announcements, but it's not like the project has gone away. It's still very much in development at the moment. It's really just there's been some bottlenecks, obviously, with SX Network. One thing we do need to do is we do need to pick a name for this new stablecoin, and we'll definitely. I think what we'll do is we'll do sort of like a community poll, so everyone can kind of choose the best sort of ticker and name for this new stablecoin, and then from there just kind of work to get it out as fast as possible, because I think it's a really, really exciting project. And so, yeah, very excited about that. Any updates on LP style AMM for prediction markets? Yeah, this is a great question. We obviously put out some research about 8 months ago on building out an automated market maker for prediction markets. Not to get too technical in the weeds, but we've sort of realized that it's a tough model to build with third-party LPs. So like think of something like Uniswap, where anyone can provide liquidity. They just provide sort of SX ETH, or SushiSwap, you just provide SX ETH. We're thinking more and more about sorry, I'm just noticing one of these comments. We're thinking more and more of it actually makes sense to not use third-party LPs. And we have some sort of updates to how we can do that. But I think one of the things too is the liquidity on Sportx can obviously be improved, but it is something we can definitely improve. But the growth has been pretty strong in the meantime. And so I guess our focus has been more on kind of growing the existing platform and sort of making improvements to the existing platform. Whereas an AMM is obviously sort of a new project. With that said, though, I think there are some really good advantages with an AMM. It's easier for people to provide liquidity to, and it's more of like a sports book versus an exchange. And so I think there is kind of room for both. And it's just kind of getting the design right so that LPs on this AMM don't get blown up, essentially. That's kind of the key thing. I would just say we've done some more research on that and hoping to kind of release some more stuff there in the future. Next slide, please. Last couple of questions. Any thoughts to competition for Sportx building on Solana? Yeah, there's definitely some projects. So one of the nice things actually is that Sportx is kind of, with the success of Sportx, we're sort of starting to get some competitors merge up. They're mostly seed level stage. And they're actually run by some pretty good teams, which is sort of a vote of confidence on the overall use case. With that being said, though, I would say they're, for the most part, 3 years behind. It takes a long time to build out this data infrastructure to support hundreds of markets. It's one of the hardest sort of technical challenges to do. Blockchains are irreversible. You can't just reverse bets for people like you can with a traditional sports book. And that's amazing for bettors because you don't have sportsbook. You can't have the sportsbook essentially, for lack of a better word, screw you over. But it also makes it harder from a technical perspective because you have to build with a very low error rate in mind. And so, with that being said, I think it's going to take a while for sort of these competitors to spin up. We also have some kind of interesting marketing strategies for getting the Sportx onto these other chains in the future. Yeah, I think we'll sort of share a little bit more with that once they're more finalized. But there's definitely some interesting ways we can both grow the SX network chain, but then still have Sportx be sort of visible and active on these other chains, and still push value to the SX network at the same time. And so we're pretty excited about that. Like one of the big advantages with what we're doing is we're not just building a business and then hoping to get apps on top of it. We actually have already built out the app layer. So that obviously gives us experience in terms of knowing how to build this infrastructure the right way, but it also opens up these interesting angles from a business development perspective, because we have this app that we can sort of use, and we can sort of leverage to build the community while also building the blockchain. Do you foresee the cost of transactions to exponentially increase with sale? Was that the logic? Yeah, so this is a great question. Gas costs on Polygon are going up tremendous amount since we've been, I don't know the exact, I think it's about 4,000 or 5,000x since we've been on Polygon. I was looking at some stat, and it was our average, our daily Polygon gas costs are almost $50 a day, which is very small still, but crazy relative to what they were a year ago. Literally less than a penny. And so that gives you sort of an indicator of the exploding demand for block space. And so this was this was like one of the big drivers for us to sort of speed up, or I should say accelerate our shift to, not even shift, just expansion or vertical integration, whatever you want to call it, in terms of building out our network. There was a huge opportunity in terms of building out sort of your own block space, and then on top of that, sort of insulating you from the platform risk of being on sort of one single chain. That Polygon at this point is kind of, to me, is the dominant layer 2, and until sort of like Optimism or Arbitrum launch their own tokens, and maybe they don't, I think Polygon will continue to be sort of that dominant layer 2 platform, especially because they're not trying to just build this sort of one size fits all scalability solution. They're really sort of thinking ahead and building, for example, the Polygon SDK, which allows you to build chains on top of it. And then obviously there's the Hermes acquisition as well. And so I think Polygon, sort of for the foreseeable future, is going to be the dominant layer 2 platform for Ethereum. And I think as Ethereum continues to grow massively, Polygon will too. And the increase in gas costs is just a natural sort of step of that evolution. And also, like I said, increasing gas costs on Polygon is a huge opportunity for SX Network. Next question. Would love to know how things are going on the market maker side of things. They making money, or the players getting the best of them at this point? I should have probably run some stats on this before. I'll try to put out some sort of stat. We have look at like sort of profitabilities of takers versus makers. I think for the most part, market makers are doing okay, and then sort of sometimes there's like latency issues or whatnot, and there can be opportunities. But yeah, I'll have to sort of get more stats on that. Seeing the success of liquidity developer incentives drive users to Polygon, Avalanche, Phantom. Okay, so this is essentially the 4th time we're asking this question. So it's essentially just asking, are we going to use the community treasury to fund liquidity mining? I totally 100% agree we should. The balance sheet, or whatever you want to call the community fund, is our biggest sort of, I would say, is our biggest kind of weapon. in the sense that think of something like EOS, where the balance sheet or whatever of the network is essentially in the hands of this private company called Block One, and they don't even have the right sort of like incentives to actually like build things for EOS the right way. It's kind of just a private funding war chest. Whereas with SX, we did the complete opposite. The tokens are in the community fund, and SX holders can decide what to do with it. And now you're starting to see projects actually move towards that model. So for example, Polygon is actually launching their own DAO, and then they're going to have sort of Matic in that DAO to play with. But again, not on the same scale where like we put the majority of the tokens there. Just to give you sort of a sense, the community fund has about 70 million SX in it right now, and it's getting, I believe it's around 400 million more SX to it. So at the current price of SX, that's around it's almost $400 million that the community fund can play with over the next 3.5 years. And so beyond just sort of using that for grants to drive new developers, I think there's a huge opportunity to sort of use that SX to actually operate in the DeFi space directly. So you can think of something where, say, there was like a lending platform on SX network. The community fund could actually deploy some of its SX from the community fund directly into lending market and spike the TVL of this new SX network lending platform, which makes sense because the SX is just sitting there, and that's a pretty attractive offer to new projects. And so beyond just the grants, I think that's a huge benefit of sort of the model we chose with SX network. To Andrew, yeah, I've cut my hair. Like I said, I'm sorry if ETH goes down. That is my fault. And when Lambo, yeah, I'm not going to answer that. But things are going really well. That's all I'll say. And obviously on the Sportx side, things are going really, really well. And really, I think our biggest catalyst is really yet to come, which is SX network. That unlocks so much other growth drivers. A lot of them aren't even really sort of known yet. And so we are working as hard as we can to get SX network up, and working with the Polygon SDK team to do so. And in the meantime, we'll continue growing Sportx and yeah, try to make our community proud. Sounds good. Mohammed, do you want to jump back on? Have I lost my host?
No, I'm here. I was just taking in what you were saying, and obviously, it's just these are great times, and we can't wait to see what's next. And thanks for sharing that valuable information on the SX network and the timeline of development and answering the questions. And the community appreciates your work and the work of the development team, and everyone else. Let's keep it going. Thank you so much for watching as well, and take time to watch later and go back and listen to some of the answers to the questions, and join the community Discord as well.
Yeah, and I will actually give Mohammed, my guy knows a guy, a big shout out. If you haven't seen the Sportx Insights YouTube channel, Mohammed's hosting a daily YouTube show for sort of NBA analysis and picks, and it's done really, really well. I think it's grown by 100% over the last 3 weeks. It's like around almost 2,300 subscribers, with like tons and tons of engagement and comments. So definitely check that out if you're sort of, I've at this point outsourced my NBA betting brain to the show, and it's been going pretty well. And so yeah, definitely check that out. Sportx Insights on YouTube. And then besides that, check out the SX Weekly newsletter and join the Discord if you haven't already. Thanks everyone for coming on this call, and we'll do another one next month.